Hello, my name's Jim Gardner and I'm a director of heritage consulting firm GJM Heritage. It's my privilege to have been asked to share some of my favourite places as part of this year's virtual Open House Melbourne 2020 program. The places I'm going to talk about should be familiar to all of you and are completely accessible during the lockdown, which is great. These places, in my view, set Melbourne apart from Australia's other capital cities. What I'm talking about, of course, is Melbourne's traditional shopping strips or high streets. And in my view, these are as Melbourne as the trams or the street art or the ubiquitous coffee shops that you find along them. What do I mean by the high street? Well, I'm talking about the linear shopping strips that range from the upmarket Toorak Road in South Yarra to the more humble Barclay Street in Fitzroy. These are typified often by two-storey shop residences dating from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, interspersed by things like the grand department stores that are found in places like Smith Street, Fitzroy, or the major public markets such as Paran Market in Commercial Road. These high streets contain the whole gamut of human life and activity, from the beloved corner pub to chain stores, independent boutiques, cafes, nightclubs, art galleries, bike shops, and creative startups. The high street is a retail format as old as the suburb itself. And the example behind me is Gertrude Street on the number 86 tram route. This is an important part of Melbourne's first suburb, that was Fitzroy. Fitzroy was established from the early land sales in 1839 as part of what was then called Newtown. It housed over 10,000 people by 1858, and Fitzroy was proclaimed a city in its own right just 20 years later. Fitzroy, like the other inner suburbs of Melbourne, was transformed by the arrival of the cable tram in the late 1880s and the electrification of those trams in the first half of the 20th century. This pattern of development was replicated across central and inner Melbourne, from Sydney Road in the north, Glenferrie Road to the east, Clarendon Street in the south, and Errol Street in the west. These high streets, in my view, are an important and unique part of Melbourne's culture. And I believe we have to thank the Melbourne and Metropolitan Tramways Board and its then chair, Sir Robert Risson, who saved Melbourne's trams, and in my view, by extension, its high streets. You may have seen a series of articles in the Age newspaper recently talking about how the high street is under threat and that its very existence is possibly at risk. These threats include high rents, changing shopping patterns, economic headwinds, and now, obviously, the COVID-19 situation. I don't mean to be too negative about this, and I think there is plenty of hope that our high streets will survive. And if we just look back into the recent past, we'll see that the fortune of Melbourne's beloved high streets have already ebbed and flowed over the past 7 decades. With the growth of private car ownership in the 1950s, the patronage on Melbourne's trams started to decline, as did the numbers of people therefore stopping and using the services on the high street. Soon after, the American-style mall made its entry into Melbourne's urban form, starting with Chadstone in the 1960s, which offered a homogenised and climate-controlled alternative to the traditional shopping experience of the high street. The gap that was created by the movement of Anglo-Celtic Australians to the new car-based suburbs was filled by post-war migrants who brought their food and culture from Europe and elsewhere to Melbourne's inner suburbs. This rejuvenation was followed in the 1970s by Vietnamese immigration to places like Victoria Street, Richmond, or with the more recent African communities who are making their mark on Melbourne's high streets, including Racecourse Road in Flemington. Not all Australians, however, were seduced by the quarter-acre suburban paradise offered by the likes of Burwood or Strathmore. The inner suburbs and their high streets were rediscovered by the trendies, the academics, the students, and the artists who were attracted by the convenience and proximity to the city and universities, the cheap rents that these inner suburbs provided, and the bohemian lifestyle that was offered, centred around the traditional high street. The high street, however, as noted in The Age, is under increasing pressure from development, challenging economic times, and now the COVID downturn. It's therefore my view that it's time now we should all rekindle our love for the traditional high street and celebrate its quirky shops, its colourful characters, and its flamboyant architecture. I invite you, albeit appropriately socially distanced, to pick up a takeaway latte and explore your local high street. Keep safe.